Call this meeting of the Board of Finance, Town of Granby to order, confirm a quorum, all 6 of us being here. We have more people than usual, so we'll take public comment first, up to 3 minutes per person, and up to 10 minutes because we want to move to the auditors.
Hello, I'm Julie Hafner, 286 Simsbury Road. I spoke last week at the Board of Ed meeting in support of a school resource officer, and I wanted to come here tonight to share my thoughts with you. So thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I've taught for over 20 years, 10 years in urban, 10 years in rural, and I've always had an SRO. And having an SRO, a school resource officer, is just invaluable to the school system, to the town. It helps create a bridge between the school and the community and the police department. And what I love about having an SRO is that it really empowers our students to use their voice and to speak up if something's wrong. And that connection will last a lifetime. And I've seen it so many times, and honestly, I was shocked we didn't have an SRO. I called the police department because I said, we must have one, and they said no. So I've wanted to come here and ask for your support with having an SRO for our town. I wanted to share too that we have I teach in Suffield. We have an amazing officer, Officer Roman. He's offered to host you and have you come in to meet him if you ever want to see an SRO in a school. I also printed off a thing about, can I give this here, about Simsbury? But our surrounding neighbors all have an SRO. So Suffield has one, Southwick, Simsbury has 2, East Granby has one. So they really see the importance of having an SRO, and I hope that you see that importance as well. And if you don't, I urge you to reach out to me and just have a conversation about that. But I thank you for your time and your consideration with getting one for Granby. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your input.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lisa Ledestri at 7 Round Hill Road in Granby, Connecticut. I have 2 boys, ages 22 and 10. My 22-year-old attended Granby Public Schools and received a wonderful education and is flourishing today. Honestly, though, my husband and I took a deep breath and a sigh of relief in 2020 when he graduated with no major incidents on school grounds. Now that we have a 5th grader embedded in the school system, there is one main issue that our son, as well as us, struggle with daily: safety. The schools do a great job with drills and educating the students as much as possible, but no one can fully prepare for all circumstances, although we can have the tools in place before it's too late. The overall safety of our children, teachers, and administrators within the schools is imperative every day. My husband has a phrase he and our son recite together each morning before he gets on the bus. Be safe, be smart, be vigilant. Be a friend, tell a friend something nice. It might change their life. These are words we didn't think we needed to share. With our oldest, now we feel we do. We all deserve to breathe a little easier when we send our kids to school each and every day. I have seen over the past 16 years since my first son started school in Granby, the climate has changed so much and the pressure continues to build. As a member of this community, as a parent to the children in the school system, and on behalf of myself, my husband, and both of my children, we are in support of an SRO officer in Granby Public Schools and would like the town to support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your input. Just so you know, a request to make it to the Board of Finance, the process is it would go through BOE, selectman, town manager, whether it be done with the budget or separately from the budget. That's the process.
Mr. Chairman, I've been reached, a number of parents have reached out to me and they asked me to pass this information along to you during the public comment. I also want to share my reply with them, which is in dovetail with what you just said. I've received outreach recently from Jen Anderson of 4 Greenwoods Road, Patricia Luke, a Granby resident, Julie, who's here tonight, Samantha Girardi of 87 Notch Road, and Samantha Straker. And the topic was all identical, their support of an SRO. This is the reply I sent back to them, again, which dovetails with your comments. My question to everyone who asks is, what problems are we trying to solve by adding an SRO? Is it safety? Is it better student to police officer engagement? Is it threat deterrence? Is the officer armed or unarmed? Does that person work for the Board of Ed or the police chief in town? What type of individual does the school system desire to fulfill the position? Is that a new officer, or is that an officer with decades of experience on the job, or somebody in between? If we use an existing officer, how does the police department backfill the newly vacant position when we have minimum staffing and a contractual requirement in place whereby the town must hire officers for the vacancy and pay overtime? Will the board be paying for a school resource officer out of found savings, or will it be a request for more funding, or will the town ask to be paying for it? What does the community want? As you can see, there are many questions to be answered, and I've forwarded that back to the residents, and they're certainly willing and engaged to have this discussion as the budget process unfolds. As you said, the superintendent will be having this discussion with the police chief soon. She then will bring her thoughts to the board, then perhaps to the Board of Selectmen. That may or may not result in agreement between both agencies. And then only when it's a budget will it be before the Board of Finance. And that process will occur over the next several months, ending around April 15th when the community votes on the budget. That will go into effect July 1. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for my opportunity to get these residents on the record, as well as my statement as to how this will proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Approval of minutes from the last meeting, September 23rd.
I make a motion to accept.
Second.
Further discussion? If not, those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions?
Aye.
Yeah. And we welcome the auditors. Thank you for coming out this evening. Floor is yours.
Okay. So my name's Jessica Aniskoff. I was the principal on the engagement for the town of Granby this year. With me, I have Brandon Cathcart. He was the manager on the engagement. We've both been on this one for several years now. Nicoletta has actually left CLA, so as of last week, but I had already taken this one over when I was advanced to principal. So now you get us. You go to the next slide. Who's got this slide? Yeah. This is our legal disclaimer. We can just go past that one. So I'm going to discuss the terms of the engagement, a quick executive summary, some financial highlights, go through the federal and state single audits, the required governance communication, and upcoming GASB pronouncements. You can switch slides. So as far as the terms of the engagement, CLA was hired to express opinions on whether the basic financial statements are presented in accordance with GAAP. We also, you can go to the next slide, sorry. We also express an in relation to opinion on the schedule of federal awards and the schedule of expenditures of state financial assistance. We provide a report on internal control over financial reporting in compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, and grants. We express an opinion on compliance related to the major federal and state programs that we tested as part of the audit. And we provide a report on internal controls over compliance related to the major federal awards and state awards that we tested. Next slide, and one more. So as far as the town's results, The town received an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which is the best opinion that you can have. And on the federal and state single audit, there was an unmodified opinion. Again, it's a clean opinion on the major federal and state programs that were tested. And we did not find any control deficiencies in internal controls over the major federal or major state programs that were tested, which I will go into a little bit later in the presentation. Okay, next slide, one more. So this first statement that you're looking at is the government-wide statement. It's Exhibit 1 of your financial statements. And what this statement is on the full accrual basis, so it includes all of your long-term assets, such as capital assets, and your long-term liabilities, such as bonds outstanding or pension OPEB liabilities. There are two other categories called deferred outflows of resources and inflows of resources, which you're only going to see in a governmental statement. And what these are mainly related to pension and OPEB. And so when you have a change in your assumptions or change in the market conditions, so that it doesn't all hit in 1 year, it's actually deferred or amortized over, maybe 5 to 7 years. So these sit out there, and every year they're adjusted by your actuaries so that the effect of a market or a change in assumption doesn't hit your financial statements all in 1 year. So overall, the town's net position increased from $61.9 million last year to $73.6 million this year. Go to the next slide. On this slide, these are your governmental funds. You're going to see your general fund, which is your primary operating fund. You'll see your other major funds, which are capital projects, and your ARPA fund. And then in the column labeled non-major is the aggregate of all of the other smaller funds of the town that don't meet the requirements as a major fund. So just looking at the general fund, there was an increase in fund balance of $2.9 million. So you can stay there. There's an increase of $2.9 million. So it increased from $12 million last year to about $15 million this year. Your capital project fund also increased. There was a deficit of $452,000 last year, and that increase has brought it to a deficit of $94,000 this year. Your ARPA fund increased by about $91,000 or $92,000, so it went from $80,000 to $173,000 this year. And then your aggregate remaining, or your non-major column, increased $776,000 from $4.9 million to $5.7 million. So all positive results in these funds. Now you can go to the next slide. In your financials, you also have an internal service fund, which is like your insurance benefits, your self-insurance fund. The net position at the end of the year increased $6,000 to $294,000 this year. You also have, which you're going to see on the next slide, a pension and an OPEB trust fund set up for future liabilities with pension and OPEB. So the pension trust fund increased $2 million to $23.5 million, and your OPEB trust fund increased $663,000 to $6.1 million this year. So your net pension liability, the total liability that's calculated by your actuaries, is decreased by what you have in these trust funds to get your net pension or net OPEB liability. So your net pension liability this year was $1.6 million, which was a decrease from last year, which was $3.8 million. It's 93.7% funded, which is up from 85% in the prior year. And for the net OPEB liability, the liability also went down this year. It was $5.1 million last year. Now it is $4.8 million, and it's 55.7% funded versus 51% in the prior year. Next slide. So this slide just shows your pension and OPEB trust funds and your net position at the end of the year, which is what's taken against that liability to see what the town still owes for the pension and OPEB liabilities. So you can see the pension trust fund ended the year at $23.5 million. The OPEB trust fund ended at $6 million, which were increases from the prior year. All right, next slide. Also in your financial statements, it's RSI 1 and 2. You have your budgets. So the total, on the revenue side, the total revenues exceeded budget by $2.7 million. Property tax collections were $44 million. and that was about 98.9% collections in the current year versus 99.26 in the prior year. So a slight decrease in collections for taxes in the current year. Expenditures also came in below budget by $377,000, and the board had approved additional appropriations of $23,500 during the year. Next slide. One more. So for the federal single audit, which I spoke about earlier, the total federal awards expended were $4.6 million. The two major programs that we tested, which is what your clean opinion is on this year, was the American Rescue Plan, or short ARPA, and the Highway Planning and Construction, which was, I think, 2 or 3 bridges that were worked on during the year, all fell under that one grant, highway planning. So as I stated earlier, those both had unmodified or clean opinions. We had no findings on those two programs that we tested. And we had no findings on internal controls over those programs either. Next slide. So for the state single audit, the total awards expended was $10.1 million. 2.7 of that is what is subject to the single audit. The rest is exempt. The major programs we tested this year were the local bridge program transportation fund and open choice. So on those two programs, again, they were no findings and no internal control findings. So for a required communication, there are certain requirements that we must discuss with you, the Board of Finance. So there were no new standards adopted in the current year. In any set of financials are significant estimates. The ones that are in the town of Granby's financials that we deemed to be significant estimates were the net pension liability, the net OPEB liability, and the IBNR, which is the incurred but not reported health insurance claims. The town uses third parties for all of these, so we get those reports directly from them, so we don't believe there's any management bias in any of these estimates. We didn't have any disagreements with management over the audit. We didn't have any difficulties. Actually, the staff here is really great to work with, so no difficulties in performing the audit. As far as uncorrected misstatements, there are immaterial items out there, which is why they're listed here. So they are above the threshold that we need to report to you, but they are not material to the financial statements. So the GASB 87, which is the lease standard, and GASB 96, which is the software subscription standard. So management looks at any leases that are out there, any software agreements, to see if they're material to the financial statements. If they are, they would be reported on that full accrual, that Exhibit 1, as a liability and then the corresponding asset. So these were reviewed in the current year. They were deemed not material, but they are, again, above the threshold that we as auditors need to let you know that they're out there. It's something that the management's going to have to look at every year because these standards are now out there. If there's a new big lease that the town goes into, at some point it may need to be reported, but as of right now, it's not material and it won't change the reader's opinions of the financial statements, so they're not reported. We had no independence issues. Go to the next slide, you're there. Management did not consult with any other independent accountants. This is a case where if management had a question on an entry or how to record something and they didn't like our answer, they kind of went shopping somewhere else to get the answer that they thought they should be receiving. So we didn't have any of that, so we don't need to discuss that anymore. There were no significant issues that we discussed with management. Again, we had no findings, but to just point out, there were no significant issues that we even had to discuss. And no other findings. Granby does prepare an ACFR, or an annual comprehensive financial report, so there are sections in here that are unaudited or we don't express an opinion on them. The management's discussion and analysis is one of those. It's a great review of the financials with a little bit more color than all the numbers that are in there. We do look to make sure that the numbers match what is in the financial statements, but we don't audit that document. There's also some RSIs for pension and OPEB, which have, a 10-year schedule as to where the town has been over the past 10 years. And again, we make sure those numbers are in line with the financials, but we don't audit them or express an opinion on them. Next slide. So just some upcoming GASB standards, because GASB is always busy keeping us employed. Statement for 2025, we have Statement 101, which is a change in compensated absences. So this standard, the first one on compensated absences was several years ago, maybe before I started doing this. So basically what GASB has done is re-looked at compensated absences to try to put guardrails around the types of leave. Obviously, we're in 2024, there's different types of leave than when this standard originally came out. So it's kind of defining different types of leave, putting some guardrails around how to calculate compensated absences. So we will be in touch with management as the next year goes on to see if that's going to have any effect or if the liability for compensated absences is going to change. There is a liability recorded right now for compensated absences, so it's not that it's not on the books. It's just going to be a matter of does that calculation slightly change with this new standard. Statement 102 is certain risk disclosures, and this is going to be additional footnotes if you fall into any of these categories. If you have one taxpayer that if they left the town, it would be detrimental to the town, you're going to have to disclose that. Or if all of your employees are in one union, that could be, again, something that could pose a risk to the town, so that would have to be disclosed. So there's certain items, and again, we'll go through these with management for the next audit year, but there might be additional disclosure with that one. And then for 2026, the financial reporting model, this has changed a couple items. Again, it's given some more guidance on the management's discussion and analysis to what's supposed to be in there to try to make them more uniform. And then it also, for your RSI, where you have your original budget, your final budget, and then your final numbers and a variance, you're actually going to have now another column in that schedule for original budget, final budget, and then the change between the two budgets. So there's going to be some additional information in your budget schedule. It's also got some smaller items and clarifies what's in operating versus non-operating and some things like that, but that's a couple years out, so we'll certainly be talking about that as the time comes. So with that, I will open it up to any questions that you all may have.
Respective duties between the two of you here.
He does all the work and I just get to look good.
That's what I thought.
No. And so Brandon would be the one on site with our team. So it was two associates that were out here with him, and he reviews their work, I review his work, and then there's also a technical team above me. So before anything goes out the door at CLA, that technical team goes through your whole financial statements, and if they have any questions or comments or concerns, they will come back to us and we will do additional work, or we have to bug Kimmy for some more things, which sometimes happens, but that's kind of the process.
Well, a couple of questions between you folks and Kimmy. The debt service, the $399, does that pertain to the leases? Yeah, page 98.
That's the clean water. That's the debt service.
The clean water,
Yeah, it's the, it's
Simsbury?
Simsbury, yes.
Okay, and that gets paid through the sewer fund?
That is paying through the, yes.
Okay, well, that's why we don't deal with it in the general fund budget per se.
Yeah, not in the general fund.
Okay. 99, the low SIP number, usually it zeroes out. That's just because we didn't draw this year.
Yeah, so
A
they
portion.
sent us a second one for FY '25. So this number, we're gonna spend it in FY '25.
Okay. 98, the intra-fund, the 2,605 eliminations. Yeah, that's just,
That's just eliminating interfunds between these special revenue funds.
Yeah.
So all these are what roll up into that non-major fund column in the front.
Yep.
So one of these funds owes another one within this schedule.
okay. And that, we've seen the last couple of years. Before
Yeah.
that, we never saw it.
You may not have had a fund that owed another one of the smaller governmental funds owes another smaller governmental fund or vice versa. So if that doesn't happen, you're not going to see that interfund eliminations column.
Okay. The bond premium, Kimmy, that, I thought we're using that premium to offset the interest.
Only the interest.
Okay, so it dropped from $1 million plus to 9 something. I thought we have to use it within a 3-year period.
That is the other one. The premium that we have remaining is not even close to the amounts. It's different amounts. And then we have to use it up. I can give you the final number, the remaining balance.
Well, it shows here, what page is this? 47.
The premium on 47 is amortized over the life of the bond. I don't know.
Yeah, which is different number than the recent 2021 premium to only
Right,
spend
this
on
is
the
all.
interest. Yeah, this is all.
All premiums
So,
that are in here.
the one for the 2021 is a different number than this one.
So where does this come from, this million?
This one is the 2021 plus the previous one.
Plus previous?
Yes, and then
Except-
they amortize it through the length of the loan. So it's a different calculations.
It's
not the same
amortized over the
calculations.
life, except you have to use it within a certain period against the bond or the interest. Is that correct?
I cannot speak for the previous one because I wasn't here, but for the 2021, yes.
Yeah, and what was it, 3 years or something like
It's
that?
3 years. You have to use it all in 3 years, or you have to pay down the debt service principal.
Okay, but for the books, you amortize it over the life of the bond.
Yeah, so that premium is included in those full accrual statements.
Okay.
So that exhibit 1 and 2. So it is amortized over the life of the debt.
Yeah. Well, that question's going to come up all the time. Okay. Questions from the board,
I have one.
please?
In the federal single audit program, page 8. Third paragraph down, the deficiency. Can you put that in layman terms for me? What that
Sure,
means?
there's kind of 3 levels of findings. There's a management level, with management letter level, which is like the lowest level. So if we had something that we saw that doesn't rise to these levels, then it would be kind of in a letter to you. If it is a significant deficiency, is kind of the middle level, and a material weakness is kind of the higher level. So if you have a material weakness, that means that either an internal control didn't work or an error was found that was material to your financial statements. A significant deficiency in that kind of mid-level might be that something was found that could cause a deficiency, but there's kind of like an internal control, or there's an error, but it didn't necessarily rise to the level of a material error. So there's kind of 3 levels that we can, if we had any findings, which we don't, that we could decide where it would fall based on how big it is or how big of an issue it is. If it's, one control that if it fails, it's going to cause a lot of errors, it might rise to that material weakness level. If it's something that's noted that we feel needs to be included in here as a finding, it's in that significant deficiency level. And then if we just have a recommendation on a best practice, that's where that management letter would come into play.
And the reason you brought it up then is if it's, on my term, immaterial, it's really not that serious.
Right, so then we have that uncorrected misstatement, past adjustment form that is actually on the back of your governance communication. So that we're saying is not material, but it's just above the threshold that we have to tell you about that it's out there. So that's even kind of below that management letter recommendations, but it is out there and we don't want to ignore the fact that it's out there.
So can I just can you explain what the numbers are?
These numbers in here? Yep.
Or Kimmy, what is it that is immaterially being noted?
Yeah, so the first page, if you have them in the same order as me, hopefully you do, is the lease receivable and the subida for the governmental activity. So this is the full accrual statements. So we are saying that this is the lessor side. So I don't know exactly which one it is, but the town has leased something out. Can we fill that information in? The town has, in theory, a receivable out there that's coming in over a certain life.
Okay.
Or a certain number of years. So that's the $430,000 that is sitting there as an asset, if you will, but it's not material, so it doesn't need to be recorded, but the town knows that it's out there, and you are still getting payments on that lease, but you're not recording an asset, and a deferred inflow is actually where the other side of that would go on your full accrual statements.
And is that new, or is the fact that it's being reported this way new?
So when GASB 87 came into play, which was 2 years ago, that's when you would have been the first time that you saw this. So you've probably always had this lease out there, but GASB 87 came in and clarified what needed to be included in the financial statements. And so they're saying this does need to be included if it were material, but it's not. So that's why it's in here.
Is that the lease that we self-fund from small cap?
Nah, this
No.
this is more like the farmer lease, the farmer, the agriculture leases,
Okay.
and then the other one would be for the tower leases.
Okay.
So these are revenues, these are expected revenues to the town that may or may not materialize.
It depends on the length of the contract that we
Right,
sign.
got it.
Right, so if you sign a new one that's 100 years at a certain amount, it may
Right.
need to be recorded in the
Okay.
future. And the Subida one is the software-based IT arrangements.
Okay.
So that one, you are actually leasing software for 3 years or whatever it may be. And that one would be an asset for your right to use or, a capital asset, and then a liability on the other side.
So in both cases, you're reflecting the tail of the transaction.
Right, and so they're here, they're not material, they won't change any reader's opinion, but they're here and need to be analyzed every year, because if something changes in the town, then these may go up or down and meet the threshold to be reported. And then the second page is just, because it's a receivable, it is also booked in the general fund. So we're passing on booking that in the general fund as well. So this is your full accrual statements, this is just the general fund, which roll up into your full accrual. But
And to give value to the immaterial consideration, there's a line at the bottom that's blue where it shows totals, and it gives a percentage of that total
Yeah.
for that, which really adds value to the materiality of it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Question, page 91, the bottom couple numbers, the 22 and 23. One's a negative, one's a positive. So,
page 91 of the financials.
yeah, Board of Tax Collector, General
Oh,
Fund.
yes, Okay, so
I just,
this is Gatsby making things really clear. Again, I hope they're not listening to this later. So,
Always listening.
so in modified accrual accounting, you are allowed to recognize receipts up to 60 days after year end. So you can recognize revenue on items that were receivables at 6/30 for 60 days. So what this is basically saying the 81,000 is what you received last year in that 60 days, and then the 84 is what you received this year in those 60 days. So if you have a receivable and you don't receive it within 60 days, it goes to deferred inflow and it doesn't go through your P&L, which is a bizarre way that Gatsby does it. But that's so that's just taking the change in those 60 days because it's kind of off year to get to what your total property tax revenue was for the year.
what the hell do they smoke to come up with?
To make it even more complicated, you're allowed to recognize it on your full accrual exhibit 1 and 2. So-
Yes, you recognize
you
all
reflect that in the
revenue.
minutes?
They must work in Washington for Christ's sake.
Like I said, they keep me employed, so.
Other questions from the board?
I have one other, just because it's a change from the way we stated in prior years, and I think I understand it, but I want to make sure this is described under the management discussion on page 15, the proprietary fund. On the net position of the internal service fund, so it said, note that the health insurance claims expense line, it refers to that some of the retiree health insurance claims were charged against OPEB this year, and that hadn't been done in the past. But so I just wanted to make sure I understood if something changed, or are we just recording it in 2 different places?
Yeah, so in FY '24, we start to move the OPEB retiree claim to the OPEB fund.
Right.
But at the same time, we allocate the same amount from the contribution from the self-insurance fund to the OPEB fund.
Okay.
So the net effect on the OPEB fund is net zero.
Okay, so it's more of a transparency thing. We're
Because the
showing the
feedback-
retiree cost in OPEB more
Yep.
clearly, but we're also funding it
Funding.
by moving it over there.
Exactly. There was a desire to really understand the metrics between the active employees and the retirees. So this year, we started to charge it, and the revenue needs to follow the
Right.
expense.
Yeah, I remember that discussion, and I just was trying to make sure both sides were there. Okay, thank you.
But in that case, the money for the full, if it's whatever, $500,000 for claims for the retirees, it's all coming from the health fund, correct?
Yeah, it's all coming from the self-insurance fund. So actually, the retiree, they do contribute a portion of their premium to the self-insurance fund. And then the differences will be the actual town contributions to it.
Which, isn't that the purpose of the OPEB fund? Should it not be covering?
That will be later discussion in this fiscal year, what the board decided to do.
Okay. If you want to true it up, that's what you got to do, sounds like to me. But- Okay, questions?
So it's what happened there?
Other questions from the board?
Okay.
All that book, and that's all we've got for questions.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just a brief comment.
Please.
So I, for quite a while, I'm still going to be the outsider, and I just wanted to point out, essentially, number one, thank you to Kimmy, thank you to Nikki, as well as Jessica and Brandon from CLNA. They're going to be doing this, perhaps 100 more times, CLA, between now and the end of the year. So again, credit to Nikki and to Kimmy for their work on this. I just wanted to point out that what I boil this report down to is 12 important metrics. One is the fund balance dollar amount and percentage amount, the medical reserve dollar amount and percentage amount, pension funding as a percentage, which you heard it's improved today, the pension discount rate, which we are using a very conservative one, OPEB funding percentage getting better, OPEB discount rate at the proper number, our bond rating, our bond debt as both a dollar amount and a percentage, our collection rate, and then our grand list value. The town of Granby didn't get here overnight. These are very, very strong metrics. So I'm only pointing that out to the people who might be watching either this broadcast live or if they go into the archives and they look at this. This shows that the town of Granby, when they have an issue, confronts it head on. And I just wanted to point it out in a boiled-down way. And in all candor, congratulate this board and the Board of Finances that came before you, that got to the town into this point. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Seems to me I asked last year whether the auditors thought if this was a company, would they buy stock in it? And all I got was a chuckle.
And I remember very vividly that question because I went, thank God Nicoletta's answering that.
No opinion, huh?
But now, because of that, I know what to say going forward. So.
The strength of this town was one of the attractive features when I took this job.
Oh, I do have one other question. I'm sorry. The property tax collection rate, I know we budget for it to be less than 100%, and we always, therefore, are over 100% on our budgeted number, but the actual collection rate was down a little bit this year. Is anybody concerned about that? I mean, I guess I've never noticed the actual number being down at all.
It was simply fractionally down. It was just a whisker under 99.
Yeah.
You historically have been at 99 or a whisker above it.
Yeah.
But we had one lien sale this year, so I don't attribute that to anything but timing.
All right. Just catching it early in case there's a trend. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
But in the past, we have at least once, if not twice, I've seen it go below the assumption of 97.5. Back, it was a few decades ago, but Barkhamsted went down like to 90%.
Really? Wow.
And that was, I think it was
Well,
the recession, early 90s.
we have a few larger taxpayers that if something happened, it could move the dial, I think, but
Well, you just collect it the next year with 18% interest.
hopefully.
Table 8 in the back has the past 10 years of
Mhm.
collection rates. If you wanted to see that, just where you were compared to some of the other years.
Other questions? If not, we thank you both
Thank you.
Good to see you. Very nice job.
Thank you very much.
for your work and for coming up. And are we the first year presenting this fall?
You were the first presentation this year, but Kimmy found out we issued one before you guys this year, so. But they weren't an ACFR, they were a little smaller, so. You're still the first ACFR that we've issued this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Both.
You folks take care. Safe travels home. Statements of accounts. We'll take Nikki and the BOE because Kimmy's
All right.
busy.
Oh, thank you. So in your packet is the first budget expense report for the BOE for the fiscal year defined by budget category covering the period of July through September of 2024. Analysis of both personnel and program accounts suggests that projected expenditures will be covered within the budget. Please note there are a few lines with negative available balances, which are due to increased insurance costs, the addition of an in-district bus route, and the need for regular education teaching assistants originally reduced during the FY25 budgeting process. At this point in time, the estimated special education expenses for FY25 are currently within the spending plan. However, we are currently seeing deficits within the special education outplacement tuition and transportation lines. As it is early in the school year and special education accounts constantly fluctuate throughout the year, account activity and balances will continue to be monitored closely. The opening balance of the Q&D fund was $95,335. There has been a small amount of expenses in this account thus far, with no revenue being received and booked to date. Current expenses are related to summer school, social work, tutoring, and one-to-one equipment costs. Once the district starts to receive open choice grant funds and tuition monies, we should start to see a shift in the ending balance. And finally, the revenue to the town for FY25 is currently projected to be $2,549,470. Similar to the Q&D fund, no funds have been received and provided to the town to date, as fluctuating special education expenses directly impact grant amounts. The excess cost grant has been and will continue to be the largest unknown throughout the year. Additionally, reimbursement funding percentages by the state for this grant are not typically final until closer to year end, which is typically around May. Any questions?
So, expenses, the whole breakout for the special ed accounts
Yes, so
is not here.
you'll see that the report is a bit different than what you are used to seeing in the past. What we've done is kind of streamline the report to make it a little bit more transparent, a little bit more reader friendly. And with regards to your special education question, first, if you look at page 1, that is program accounts. So I've given special education its own line, number 10. So special education, program expenses, you'll see the original budget. And then if you go to the right, you'll see how much has been expended, encumbered, and the balance available thus far. And then if you go to page 2, that's all personnel expenses with those lines. So then you'll also see that special education has its own line for personnel expenses. So the breakout, the detailed breakout is no longer part of the report, but you'll see that special education, you can actually see what special education is, both program and personnel.
The finance subcommittee, do they even look at this? And
They do. And it has been presented to them, it has already been presented to them and to the board.
I would have expected they would have wanted to see more detail than what you have here.
It has not been asked.
I think that you said that it's definitely more streamlined,
Yeah.
but it's a little, just in my view, it's a little less transparent because we're missing all the lines that are all the lines that fall into the subtotals. I think it's definitely a cleaner look, which I can completely appreciate, as long as we have the opportunity to toggle through and expand those lines to see the details.
Right.
So if you want to provide, I understand for reporting purposes, maybe in this forum, and certainly for the residents who look through this document, it's a good view, but I think for us, just speaking for myself, and my colleagues can comment as well, the view that we had at a line level is definitely, we all can navigate pivot tables and spreadsheets pretty well. It helps us track trends as we go throughout month to month. The other thing that it was missing that, and by the way, I don't want to say I was surprised by, because I think Sherry expressed last month that we'd get a different view, which is fine. Now that we have that different view, the missing columns of the forecast, based on what we know today, what we expect the forecast at the end of the year to be, that line is pretty important for me personally, as well as the comparison versus the previous month. So those two, it's the right last two columns. If we could have those added back in, that would be pretty helpful as well for me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I want to understand what the forecast helps with, because in fact, this year, if we use FY, 24 as an example, special ed came in under budget. Yet every month, the forecast projected using the words over budget condition, and that was actually not accurate. So I'm trying to present a very accurate picture of the budget. Special ed is volatile, as you know, and there's two lines that are volatile. It's our transportation line, and it's our out-of-district tuition line. So we can't really forecast that a child is going to move into the district and require out-of-district transportation for an out-of-district placement. It truly isn't possible. If it were, our budget would be to the penny, because we would be able to anticipate those costs in special ed. So this approach provides you with real-time information that is measurable by what has been encumbered, what has been spent, and what is remaining. And if you go through that remaining column, we then have to quarterly, which is what we're doing with our board, look to say, do we need to make transfers to make a particular line whole? Nikki and I both come from other districts across the state, and so last year's reporting to the Board of Finance monthly, with all due respect, having the Board of Ed need to say, and we're again in an over budget condition, truly was never realized. We didn't end the year in an over budget condition. We ended the year returning funds to the town, and we were able, in a very volatile year of special education, still able to come within the allotted budget amount. So
Which is commendable.
I don't necessarily think that forecast is a true forecast. And what I actually found upon reflection, going over every month's statement of accounts over the last 10 months that I were a part of it, is that it didn't predict the following month nearly at all. Because once we made those appropriate transfers, and once we combined routes and paid bills and did all the things we needed to do, we were able to stay within our allocation. And so our goal is always to stay within that allocation, and I think that the Board of Finance knows that we're working extremely hard in the area of special education to make sure that we are reporting accurately, but also doing everything that we can to remain as fiscally tight, for the lack of a better word, that we can. So we're happy to provide any information that the Board of Finance, would like, certainly. But in having these conversations with Mike Warco and our Board of Ed Finance Committee over the summer, we expressed our desire to really provide a public-facing report that is accurate and easy to read and easy to understand for the people that don't watch the meetings but peruse the statement and then share across town that we're yet again in an over budget condition.
Right.
And then just to follow after that as well, with the report, this is something that I look at on a constant and consistent basis. And there are actually over 630 accounts that feed into this report, and as well as the other report that had additional lines. But there are over 600 accounts that we are monitoring consistently on a daily, weekly basis. But like Sherry had said, we were trying to provide a report that everyone could pick it up, look at it, and understand it, which we feel is important.
I appreciate that, and certainly before I ended up on a board, I was probably one of few too many that actually do look at the paperwork that all the boards put out. I don't think enough of our residents look at it, and I hope more take interest in it. When asking about why the forecast is important, certainly within my own business, if we were to set a budget at the beginning of the year and say, well, that's the budget and we're going to stay within the budget, we all know that that doesn't happen often as well as we plan. As Mike Tyson, said, everybody has a plan until they step in the ring and get punched in the face. Unfortunately, we get punched in the face very often in municipal because of a lot of things that we can't control. The forecast and the things that go into the monthly swings, and by all means, we come in here and 1 month it's a swing this way and everybody goes, yay, great job. And then it swings in the other way and we go, ooh, what happened? It's all that narrative that happens in between that keeps us informed in what you look at every single day, right? And we certainly have confidence in the fact that you guys monitor every one of those 600 plus lines and that you're working to stay within that budget because we all signed off on it, right? We as soon as it was voted on, we all signed off on it, and that's what we do. And we as a Board of Finance support what you have to do within the bounds of our agreements to make sure that we deliver absolutely the best services for the town and for the school district, as well as being financially responsible. It's the narrative within the forecast month to month that allows us to understand all the triggers and switches that happen throughout the year so that we're very in tune with what's going on, so that quarterly, when something does switch, it's almost like, at least from my perspective, quarterly is too infrequent for me to get that deep into the weeds. I'd rather be semi-deep in the weeds more frequently, if that makes sense. Al, I know you had something you were going to say.
Yeah, I truly understand the volatility of special education because we've been living with that problem every year that I've been on the board, and it's gone up and down and whatnot. I also understand the negativism of making projections that turn out to be totally incorrect, and that doesn't play well with the constituencies of education and so on. On the other hand, now we're in a position where we have things aggregated on a quarterly basis, and there's really no way to understand what's going on, in fact, on a current basis. And I know you track it on a current basis, on a monthly basis, and maybe even more frequently. At least that kind of information would be helpful to have without a projection or understanding as to what might be happening. The real numbers would be very, very important. And the real numbers should be available on a monthly basis, not quarterly. That's not... The last thing we all need is a terrible surprise, because then we all look like we don't know what we're doing. And to counteract that kind of a surprise, and special education is that one, we need to have that information, I do believe.
And Nikki, to be clear, nobody wants to create additional work or busy work just for the sake of having it. And I'm sure we'll figure out some common ground in the detail.
We just have to go back to the Board of Ed and, this was a decision that was made by the Board of Ed and our Finance Committee. So I will go back to the Board of Ed. I know that Mike and Monica have already had conversations. We had already planned to present this first expense report, but we can certainly go back to the Board of Ed and let them know that you're requesting monthly reports. So.
And then please just know that
It was a decision of the Board of Ed, not us personally.
Right, and there's certain levels of need that we have as a Board of Finance as well, and we'll figure it out.
For what it's worth, I guess I just want to note that, so I came to the Board of Finance from the Board of Ed, and I've always struggled with that this is actually much more similar to the way the town reports the numbers.
Exactly.
The town doesn't make an effort to project. It says, here's what we've expended and here's what we've encumbered. And everybody has seemed comfortable with that.
The town has a lot less volatility in the variance to budget.
I understand, and, but so if I were to ask a question, it would be more about how do you go about figuring out how much as of today, what to encumber versus not? Because that always seems like sort of more of an art than a science anyway. I mean, if it were me, I'd encumber whatever was spent, I'd encumber 100% of the rest and say we're right on budget, unless I know something different, right? I mean.
Right, when you have an encumbrance, that is what you were expecting to spend at this point in time, and that is what fluctuates and
We're
shows.
not really expecting to spend only 35% of the student activity and athletics thing, probably. We're expecting that to change. So I think it's legitimate to have a discussion about how we hear from both boards about where they think the year is going to end up during the year as it plays out. Because that doesn't really come through in here, in this kind of reporting. In terms of whether we get something more monthly or not, I guess I have confidence that the Board of Ed has a finance committee that is hopefully staying on top of it, and I assume I'm welcome to go participate in that meeting if I want to, so.
And if at any point in time, even though these reports right now are quarterly,
Right.
if at any point in time with special education, since that is obviously one of our more volatile budgets, if we do see something go awry or it's going to go, off the board, that's not something that we would hold for a quarterly report. That is not something that we would hold on to. That is something that would be communicated immediately to, first it would be myself to the superintendent, and then it would go to the finance committee, and then obviously it would be coming here as well. But that's not something that would wait for a report.
So monthly, what does your finance subcommittee look at if they're only going to see this document quarterly?
Well, the finance committee, there's a lot of other things that we'd also discuss with them beyond just the financial report. So we are hoping to do other types of business, like we'll have them look at contracts and things of that nature. That ultimately will lead into the numbers in this report.
So the Board of Ed is not looking at the numbers monthly?
I meet with our
No.
board chair every week, and she and I review the swings and.
But your finance
The
committee is
board
not
chair.
looking at the numbers monthly anymore. They're also looking quarterly.
Yes, this report goes to them.
The summary of our
Right.
spending is quarterly, the executive summary. However, every single month, we have contracts that we review, our fund balance for nutrition. We had to add the bus this year, so we're monitoring that very closely. We're developing special education programs. I need them to look at those. I mean, the list is long of things that they govern and support us with that feed this report, if that makes sense. We just did a recruitment fair with Heartland. I need to share that with my board because our numbers depend on how many students we accept and receive from Heartland. Same thing with Open Choice. We spent 3 months looking at where are our openings, what are our enrollment figures, how many students can we take in from kindergarten. We get a bonus, we have a certain number. So there's so many, the list is lengthy of different items that we need the board finance committee, subcommittee to review, which all lead to this document. We had a whole presentation on our transportation. We're trying to combine routes. All of those things need to have, insight and feedback from our finance committee. But as far as seeing this report, we are moving to quarterly reporting. But as I shared earlier, I'm certain that the board wants to work collaboratively with the Board of Finance, and if there's a request to make a change, I will bring that to my board chair for consideration.
Well, I guess my point was I'm less concerned about the approach. Because in my mind, it's consistent with the rest of the town. And yes, we would trust that if something was a huge piece of volatility suddenly sprang up there, you would want us to know about it sooner rather than later. So,
And I think that's what
but I guess one question is, once it's set up this way, whether you push a button every month or push a button every quarter, it's to run this report more often than quarterly is work.
Yeah, there's work. Yes, there's work behind it.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I'm surprised
have
that
a-
once it's set up, it can't just
We
be.
don't have that type of software.
Well, then I would be more concerned, because that means you can't be on top of it all the time. See, that's the other side of it, if you're not seeing where it is.
Yeah, I guess that would be my concern is, if you're not looking at it monthly and
If you're
the
not,
subcommittee's not looking at it monthly and forecasting ahead, how are they making adjustments? Like, how are you making decisions based on?
We're looking at,
We make those
we make those decisions. I'm looking at 630 accounts, just in the general fund. That's not including the other funds all the grant funds and everything like that. So I'm looking at those on a consistent basis. But I have to take those numbers. I can't just give 630 accounts for everyone to look at and everyone to analyze. I have to take those numbers and put it into a reader-friendly document so that everybody can understand it and ask questions based on that. So that's the difference. Like, I'm myself and the finance committee and the staff and the superintendent, everyone is all the time looking at these numbers to ensure that we are staying within the appropriated dollars that have been provided for that fiscal year.
Well,
I have 3 people in my special education department that meet with me weekly, and all we look at is transportation lines. Can you combine lines? Nikki's on the phone with Craig, we're asking for better figures. Like, we're doing this multiple times a day. But my board meets twice a month for 1 week, each meeting for the subcommittees. That's 2 hours a month. And I need them to govern and weigh in on many items that frankly have been neglected. We have a lot of work to do if we want to start saving money. We need to get better contracts for our nurses. We need to get better contracts for our busing. We need to get better contracts for our food service. I mean, there's a number of things that need our attention in order to be forward-thinking. And reviewing a statement of accounts every month is certainly a priority, and it's very important. And if we're requested to do that monthly, we will continue to do it monthly. We made the decision in a number of summer meetings to move to quarterly in order to free up some of those 2 hours for a number of other things. That committee oversees finance, policy, and communication. So, we have a team of people that are paid well and have expertise in this particular area, and we're not going to let it slide. And I want you to trust us, and if that requires more reporting, we're happy to do that. But truly, we are not going to let it slide, and if something comes awry, you're going to be the second to know right after my own board. So, but this is all new territory. We're new in our positions, and we're trying to make headway in particular areas, and we're just trying to squeeze time out of thin air where there just isn't enough time. So I truly do not want to give you the impression that we're somehow not overseeing because we made a decision to move from monthly to quarterly. And I don't wish to give you that impression. And so if the ask is that we go to monthly, I'm certain that the board will take that under consideration.
Well, that was the standard. We were at monthly.
Correct.
And I think that we were voted in to monitor the finances of the town and the budget and guide that process for every forward year. Without being able to see it monthly is, for me, is tough.
yeah, Nikki, I truly commend you for 630 accounts and keeping track of those. I surely wouldn't want to do that. But those that are potentially explosive, transportation in special education, I think those have to be monitored on a monthly basis. And I think you should share that information with us. And hopefully the Board of Education will support that.
Well, one would think that they'd want to see it, but certainly I think you're hearing that we do. One other question I have has to do with the end of the year. We have not seen any statement of accounts from you folks. We have the letter and that talks about transfers, but we have nothing for June 30th.
Did you receive the transfer report that I had done?
You asked for it and sent
have the letter from, which we had at the last board meeting. It talks about the transfers.
No, this would have been the last finance committee meeting. I had done a report for them because you wanted to see the transfers that had happened between the accounts. Was that not sent to you?
I don't believe I've seen it, no.
We were surprised that it wasn't in the packet.
Yeah, I was too, when I received the
It
packet.
was a part of our finance committee.
No, because if
I'd
you
have
look
it.
back at the last 2 years, it showed original budget lines, it showed the transfers, the new, before that, we'd see 2 statement accounts. One was
Right.
before transfers, one was after. But so far, we've seen nothing except for this letter.
Okay, we discussed it at your last Board of Finance meeting. You requested that we provide you with a transfer document. The following week, we had our Board of Ed, or 2 weeks, we had our Board of Ed Finance Committee meeting. Nikki created it for them on your request, and it was included in our packet. So if for some reason that didn't come to you, I don't, Kathy, do you remember seeing that? With our, it was with the whole packet?
Put that together.
Okay.
I do have a
Brought
copy.
because we thought
So
you might have.
that's the transfers, but that's not your statement of account or whatever you're using. Is it this form or the other form, the old form?
On June 30th.
June 30, we have nothing.
Right, so for June 30th, we did not do this report. However, following, like Sherry said, the last meeting, the finance meeting, I did put together a year-end transfers report that follows this same pattern.
So for June, if you didn't do this one, did you do the green one?
I'm sorry?
Hold that up.
Did you do the old?
No.
Was there any?
We did not
No.
do that final report for
We
June.
had an interim business manager for almost 3 months. So, no, we did not. Nope.
What did the auditor use? The auditor obviously
Yeah.
finalized the numbers.
Right, they don't necessarily use that statement of accounts for their numbers. We provide them with a whole plethora of other numbers for
And then
them
they
to
fill that
get to their
yourself.
financial statements.
Well, if you could forward then
Yes,
whatever
I
you
have, and I have a copy here for you if you'd like it.
Okay.
Yep.
It never got,
I have a clarity question. These statements of accounts, the 3 pages, those have to be manually created?
So
They won't generate themselves? when
it's
the-
just not, they don't manually just flow into this report. So I take a report that comes out of our software system that then generates the total amounts that go into this report. But in order to do that, I'm also analyzing the numbers as I'm going along to provide the information to the board and to the finance committee.
The green document isn't a process of asking the computer to print?
It's the same thing. There's always manual entries associated with it. It's not a computer generated report.
So when you put it in they got to be put in someplace once. So when you put it in that place once, it doesn't automatically go to another accounting?
No. A lot of times it goes over out of our software system into Excel. And
So
then that's
this-
where it's coming.
Excuse me, so it's not capable, the system we have in the education department does not have the capability of doing those kinds of processes?
It doesn't generate the report that you see here or that report. There is always some manual entries that are associated with it. Because like I said, you're taking 630 accounts and you're getting them, whether it's that report or this report, there has to be some manual components to it.
I retired 30 years ago, and I had over 600 accounts. And when I put it in one place, it went up to all the other places where I had to report.
Can I ask a specific question?
please do.
What is the out of expectation insurance cost that is higher than we thought it was going to be?
That's the LAF insurance, the liability, auto, and property insurance with KERMA. It was higher than budgeted
So it
this year.
wasn't comp, it was liability, auto, and property. So do you know, was it specifically property? Or do you-
There was some property, but then also like cyber insurance was more expensive,
Okay.
which is common
Yeah.
these days, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comment from the board?
Can you talk to us a little bit about the teaching assistants? So you said you added them back in.
Yes, so during the FY '25 budget process, it was budgeted that we were hopeful that we could reduce the budget by, I believe it was 4, and this is for things such as like recess aides, lunch, recess monitors, lunch aides, things of that nature, where with the student population and things that we had to add them back into the budget.
All 4?
I believe there's 3 added in, and if we add the 4th one, I believe at the middle school, then it would become, that line would go further negative. But right now, we have not hired that person.
So I guess so you've added 3 and there's a plan to add the 4?
We didn't add 3. We had projected reducing by 3. We were unable to do so due to some student behaviors that these are not special education students, but they're students that require additional supervision. And so we had one of the 4 not start the year, and we have not yet filled that position. We're hoping not to fill.
That one.
We're trying to use sort of
Okay.
creative
ways.
scheduling in-house to not fill that one position. But what you're seeing there is unfortunately a student need that we were unable
To realize that.
So to clarify, you anticipated being able to cut.
Reduce by 4.
The budget was then reduced by that amount. So
correct.
basically, those 4 FTE were not in the budget.
Those
Correct.
teaching-
And now
Correct.
they're back in the budget.
Correct.
So
3 of the 4, yep.
which is
Just
causing
tipping the
an
scale.
unfavorable position in that line.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay?
We were a little too optimistic in what our needs would be in that area.
Further questions for the DOE? If not, we'll move to municipal. Kimmy, Mike?
So for the highlight for the revenues, the past collections was consistent with the prior year at 56% versus 57% last year. And as you can see, the stick rate is starting to go down. Last month it was 5.14. This month it's around 4.99. But we still get about $102,000 in September from the SIP account. We also received the tier pilots funding and the current member equity, which is imported in the September report. Highlight for the expenditure, we're also consistent with the prior year, 44%. This year and 43% around the same time last year. You can see that the public work overtime is a little bit higher than the prior year due to the couple rainstorm happened in the summer. And the police department overtime expenditure is also a little bit higher than last year due to the vacancy, which we just filled it recently in the police department. So you should see that number should shrink a little bit when we have a full-time person in. And I will take any questions.
So, Kimmy, revenue, page 2. Open farm day, down on the bottom, 43715. So we received 1250, we've had open farm day, so is there more we would tend to expect, or is this money that shows up in June for next year?
Well, it will be the June. So some of the collected usually happen. They usually do the advertisement and start the asking for the fundraising donation in May and June
Okay,
for the September.
all right. Questions from the board? once, screened twice.
The only question I had, Chairman, is, Kimmy, is this as much condensing as can be done with the funds? Haven't we talked about condensing or joining some funds?
Is that for the next agenda?
That's
Sorry.
next item, yeah.
That's the,
But you're right.
Okay.
okay.
Goes down at 25.
So that's as good as,
Yeah,
we
so
can get- okay.
last year we closed four or five funds, and this is the result of the closing of those funds. So we still have, I didn't count them, so we still have quite a bit of funds.
Well,
25.
I've asked Mike and Kimmy to take a look at a few, in particular ones that just sit there doing nothing, and see what we can do with them.
I arrived at the end of the budget process last year, so I really just held on for dear life. This year, as you know, we're moving to ClearGov, so we actually start the town-side budget hearings after this particular week. We'll sit down with all the department heads. One of the things that I want to get to understand, which Kimmy intimately knows, are what are all the funds, what are they used for, and so forth. And we will try where we can to use some of those as sources of funds so that they're out of existence, but only where we can statutorily do it and it makes sense. So it's on the to-do list.
One question, of all these funds that are listed, which ones, well, we have the investment accounts on the bottom, but which other funds do not get combined and put into the STIF investment account? So which ones just sit in the bank?
Which ones does sit in the bank?
To answer that question, let me ask Kimmy a question. The last column, fourth column, where it says interests, the check mark means that that is a fund that receives an allocation of interest from the STIF account.
Yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I understand your question, there's 6 on the front page, and 7 on the back page. Those are the funds that receive allocations of interest from STIF. Did I state that correctly?
Yes.
That doesn't mean the money that's in the other ones isn't invested in STIF.
It's invested, but it's not allocated back to the individual funds.
Right, so your question was, are there any of them that, where the funds are not part of the pool that's invested in STIF? I think.
Yeah, what's invested in STIF, we're getting the 5 point whatever %. If it's just sitting in the bank,
Oh, okay.
all we're seeing peanuts.
Not really. So, let me give you the overview. So, STIF account is just one of the account that earn interest. We have other money market account that earn interest as well. So, money market account may not have a same STIF rate. Currently, the STIF rate is about 4.99. Some of the money market account, we have good relationship with the bank. We can earn up to 4.5, 4.25, 3.75. So there's not just one pool of account that earn interest. And then we only have a checking account, which I monitor closely, that I only put what we needed for that week in that operating account that don't earn interest. So all the money, all of the rest money is in the multiple money market account or STIF account earning interest. I only put aside, if we're payroll week, we have to put aside at least $2 million for the payroll. So I do the moving of the cash basis needed weekly to the operating account, checking account to pay all the weekly check that we send it out. All the rest is in different account. I only highlight the STIF account because it's earned the most.
I see. But you're basically trying to keep everything but what we need in cash on hand invested somewhere.
Yes.
So how about on the back page, as an example, the BOE accounts, what do those sit in?
In the BOE accounts. So because the town has its own TIN number, the Board of Ed has their own TIN, so I don't see their account, so I don't know how much interest they earn on those accounts.
Okay. And the 35,000
I already moved it.
lapse fund is not in stiff,
It's not.
they have it in some checking account.
I don't know if they're in the trusting account, but it's in the Board of Ed account that they gave me a designated account number. I wired it to their requested account number.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that was the thing, the initiation of the
Long
non-lapsing
lapsings?
fund?
Yes.
That got resolved?
Yep.
Okay.
Off that subject, I only had one question, which is, as residents, we've seen some pretty heavy utility cost volatility, especially with electric. And how has that potentially affected our town utility costs?
Mike can talk about electricity.
Well, on a going forward basis, this coming Friday, we are in a consortium with the Capital Region Council of Governments. They've hired an outside consultant named Titan, and both the board and the town, for July 1, 2025, will receive an auction bid. I don't know how good or how bad that will be. We'll know a little bit more Friday. I can say that currently the town pays off of a prior bid
.07.
0.07
Yeah.
cents per kilowatt hour.
Nice.
So we'll be going probably north of that. And then the board is with Eversource. They received the bid several years ago. They came off the bid, and we are now trying to relink ourselves and go with auction.
So both the town and the Board of Ed are in locked-in rates?
Different places in the locked-in rate today. We will be jointly together on July 1.
Understood.
At a rate to be determined.
Right.
And they both expire?
On different timeframes. The board had already expired. We will expire, if I understand the issue correctly.
But currently not seeing volatility like our residents are.
Not to that
So it's not
degree.
knocking us off
I'll,
budget at the moment.
I'll also comment a little bit on a forward basis. If the chairman allows me a minute or two at the end, I want to talk a little bit about CPAC. One of the things that CPAC will do is it will also look at solar on town buildings. There might be opportunities. We've had the Connecticut Green Bank do the inventory of all town buildings, including the 4 school buildings plus all the town buildings. There are opportunities where we can put canopies up. There are opportunities where we can put solar on rooftops. And there are places where the Connecticut Green Bank said, don't put any solar on these. Now, solar is not a panacea where it's going to save, say, half your bill. But in all reality, there's probably 10% of electric savings or more that's available through adding solar. It's also good for the community to see that the town is reducing its carbon footprint and it's doing something with renewable energy. So we want, meaning the town and the board administration wants CPAC, which, again, I'll talk about in a minute. It's 2 members from the Board of Education, 2 members of the Board of Selectmen, 2 members of the Board of Finance, plus a number of ad hoc members, like the chair of each of those committees, myself, the superintendent, and the town treasurer. We want to be directed where this community is comfortable exploring solar, and then we could put together a deal. We'll bring it to the Board of Selectmen, and if they believe it's cost-effective, then we'll enter into the agreement, and an outside company will come in and erect solar on our buildings.
Is that 10% that you mentioned a net savings after the install?
Yes. In any case, we would not own the installations. These are what they used to call net metering. There's actually a new kind of coin phrase that they've done now. But in no circumstances am I recommending that the town own the system. The maintenance would be done by a third party. The ownership would be done by a third party. In essence, we would replace Eversource with a solar company. The solar company would own those panels, would maintain those panels, and essentially most of the savings comes from federal tax credits that now can be passed through to municipalities. And finally, the lack of a your electric bill is based on generation and delivery. We get to avoid the delivery if we create solar on our own buildings. So.
Totally understood.
Yeah, essentially.
You'll see my permits very shortly. I think they were filed this week for a very similar arrangement.
Yeah, so essentially you're taking the savings that you can achieve through no delivery, and you get to record about 10% of that to bottom line, maybe a little bit more.
So if I look at my bill, there are 4 or 5 categories that make up the final charge. There is usage, that's how much electricity you use. We will be getting a 10% discount on our usage, but we still pay the, what's the other term?
Delivery.
Delivery, thank you. That's still the same.
So I don't want you to walk away and think it's a straight algebraic equation where we're going to save 10%. I simply use that as an illustrative example. Eversource has done a number of things recently. For instance, a public component of their bill, which is, a considerable amount for shutoffs and a whole bunch of things. I'm talking in generalities that your bill prior to the time of Eversource splitting it out was based on 2 large components. We will eliminate one of those components, the delivery. However, the company that's going to be charging us will probably exceed what Eversource charges us for generation because they have to build a solar panel and maintain it on our property. So between an increase in the generation side due to the infrastructure they're putting in, a decrease on the delivery side complemented by federal tax credits is going to result in the savings. That's going to be different by each building. I just use if the high school's paying $30,000 a year, with a solar application, we may save $3,000. Again, it's not money that we can look away from because every dollar saved is a dollar earned, as they say. And I grew up, if you watch the pennies, the dollars will watch themselves.
Kimmy, question. 3 questions. The fund sheet here, account 233, sewer assessment fund. So that has that 399,080, which you talked about being debt service. So the debt service gets paid from this sewer assessment fund.
Well, on the financial statement, we call it debt service, but on our accounting system, we call it sewer assessment fund. So they essentially is the same thing. So that is the clean water, whereas the loan, the clean water loan that we deal with is Simsbury, that's what we pay them, is coming out from this fund.
Okay, but the encumbrance is a certain amount. There's 2, I'm sure the selectmen, when they put on their water pollution control hat, sewer fund, whatever, I see the balance in the account has gone up. I assume the encumbrance, whatever we owe, has not gone up. It's a certain amount, even if it's X amount or certain amount per year.
Yeah, so was it last year? So every 3 years, we go back to the Board of Selectmen. It's usually that clean water loan is paid off by the 233 fund or utility, the sewer utility fund. So because of the money that we continue to take in from that sewer assessment fund, so last request that I did to the Board of Selectmen was 100% of the clean water loan coming out from this fund. Before it was like 25%, 75%, but I make the recommendation to be 100% coming out of the funds because of the dollar amount that's sitting in this fund. So you will see this fund significantly go down in the coming 2 years.
Okay. All right, and quickly, 610, the 196, that's the repayment for the steep grant for the sidewalks.
Yes, they are. So
And the
we
state?
are waiting for the state come in to audit and to close it out. We are waiting for them to come. Well, I don't want to say it in public, but yeah, it's sitting in that fund.
Well,
We won't
okay, let it
lose.
sit. That's all. Is it sitting someplace earning us,
I'm not calculating interest on this one.
no, but is it sitting someplace?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, don't give them the interest. Okay, and then 620 in the hole, that's because you're waiting for the reimbursements on,
Yeah, for the school, mainly for the school project. The bridge project, we already get the money in. The high school project, the phase one, we haven't seen any money from the
Okay.
Board of that school project.
any other questions from the board? If not,
Is that-
move to set the date of the next meeting, which would be,
Mr. Chairman, can I interrupt for a minute?
please, go ahead.
I know the hour is late, so I'm going to try to be brief. On the 23rd of October, I sent Mr. Chairman a letter, and I'd like to quote 2 paragraphs from that letter for the record. In the past several years, a series of family and personal medical issues have made it inadvisable to continue to serve in my role of the Board of Finance, and therefore, I must regrettably tender my resignation effective November 1st, 2024. It was a great experience serving in local government, and thank you for the opportunity. And my best wishes for continued success in leading the excellent Board of Finance in meeting Granby's complex financial needs and operational requirements. Under your guidance and watchful eye, the town has a bright and fiscally responsible future. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. You've been a big asset for this board for a long time. Asset, I said, not assay.
Not a liability, oh.
No, not at all. We thank you for your service.
Well, thank you very much.
Long time. November 25th would be the fourth Monday I'd expect to meet, and we will have some discussion in terms of capital and modeling. A motion to adjourn, please.
Mr. Chairman, just before you adjourn, 4 quick things. I don't want the board to leave here without some common knowledge. 87 Simsbury Road, the Board of Selectmen voted to acquire that. It's in the attorney's hands for closing. At the next Board of Selectmen meeting on November 4th, CPAC will be recreated for the Board of Education, the Board of Finance, and the Board of Selectmen. If you can forward your 2 individuals' recommendations to me, I'll incorporate that in the communication that goes to the Board of Selectmen. While I don't want to pay any less attention to the operating budget, I do want to pay more attention to the capital budget. Hence, CPAC will be a valuable partner to the process, and we will align both the operating and the capital with the process. You will see 3 things going out. One is an RFP for a park study. We hope to forward look at what the community is interested in, the fields that we're underusing, the fields that we're overutilizing, and the Board of Selectmen put American Rescue Plan Act money in place. The RFP will be posted tomorrow, and we hope to have somebody onboarded to do a study of both Salmon Brook Park and Aaron's Park. There is also a library RFP that was posted today for a capital campaign. As CPAC deals with what they may or may want to do as far as priorities, the expansion of the library is one of those that they'll take under advisement. At the same time, the library will hire a capital campaign consultant to really assess within the community what size the library should be and how much should be bonded compared to from private contribution. And finally, we need to study our sewer use. We need better metrics We have a limited capacity of what we can still send to Simsbury, and we have at least 4 projects on the horizon that may absorb all of that capacity. While the development is an exciting thing, if we are in any way encumbered with the loss of time because we can't adequately project what our sewer metrics are, we want to ensure that those are captured before this development comes to us. That means we have to take a look at our pumps. That means we have to look at our capacity, and we will also be engaging Ty and Bond to do phase 2 of their study. So as CPAC gets underway, park study is being worked on, library capital campaign in conjunction with that, and finally sewer study. All of these things will shape the direction CPAC, the Board of Selectmen, Board of Education, Board of Finance go with respect to capital items. I just wanted everybody to hear that from me, as opposed to bits and pieces of what's the town doing and why.
I have one question. Capacity, define that term. Is it that
How much flow we can send to Simsbury a day that they'll process? We have a cap on the amount that they can process, and we are closely just under the cap, and more development will put us over the cap.
Okay.
So our capacity is insufficient to really take on the possible development that will be coming in the next 5 to 10 years.
I remember a number of years ago that we were less than 50% of our contract with Simsbury. We now have gotten almost to 100%.
The last time we officially looked at it was 1989.
Yeah, that may have been.
And we have very little capacity left. We're going to examine if, in fact, the metrics we use to measure it are accurate, and if they aren't good, we want to know one way or the other. But we also know our 3 pump stations are at the end of their useful life, and that's an important piece of information for CPAC to know and understand when they prioritize safety improvements within the school system, library expansion, or developmental opportunities that'll mitigate future tax increases. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay. A motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, none. Abstentions, none. The motion carries. Good night, all.